Black woman marry the Korean mafia who betrayed her father and caused his death, to get back at him. The smell of smoke still haunts me. It wasn't the sharp, sudden scent of fire you notice and escape from. It was thick, oily, clinging to the back of your throat like a curse that refused to leave. Even now, years later, when rain hits hot concrete, my chest tightens and I'm back there again. Back on that street in Busan, watching my world burn. That night began like any other lie disguised as safety. My father kissed my forehead before leaving. His hands were rough, scarred from decades of violence he pretended I'd never notice. He smelled of whiskey and sandalwood, his usual armor. When he smiled at me, it didn't reach his eyes. "Stay inside, Amara," he said. "No matter what you hear." I should have listened. But I never did when it came to him. My father, Amara Johnson, was a legend in shadows. A black man who climbed his way through Asian underworld politics with nothing but intelligence, discipline, and an unbreakable code. He wasn't a gangster in the way movies like to portray. He didn't crave chaos. He built bridges between criminal empires that hated each other, negotiated ceasefires, designed strategies that kept bloodshed minimal. That night, he believed he was finalizing his exit. One last deal. One last shipment. One last promise. Freedom. I watched him step into the black car outside our apartment building, his silhouette swallowed by tinted glass. Something twisted in my stomach then, an instinct screaming danger, but I swallowed it like I always did. When you grow up surrounded by violence, you learn to ignore fear. 2 hours later, I heard the sirens. Not close enough to panic. Not far enough to ignore. I grabbed my coat and ran. The warehouse district was chaos, flashing red and blue lights bouncing off wet pavement, police shouting in Korean, smoke rolling thick into the night sky. I pushed through the crowd, heart hammering, until I saw it. The warehouse. Engulfed in flames. Fire poured from the windows like rage given form. Metal screamed as beams collapsed inward. And there, right across the street, stood a line of men in black suits, untouched by the chaos. They weren't panicking. They were watching. That's when I saw him. Kang Min-jae. He stood slightly apart from the others, tall and composed, rain dripping from his black hair down the collar of his perfectly tailored coat. His face was carved from cold precision, sharp jaw, unreadable eyes, lips pressed into a neutral line. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He looked satisfied. My legs locked in place. Something inside me shattered when I realized this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a deal gone wrong. This was planned, executed, controlled. A scream tore from the warehouse, raw, human, desperate. My father. I tried to run toward the fire, but hands grabbed me from behind. Someone yelled my name. I fought them, nails clawing, throat burning as I screamed until my voice broke. And then, silence. The roof collapsed inward with a thunderous crash, sending sparks high into the sky like dying stars. The scream stopped. So did my breathing. Across the street, Kang Min-jae raised his hand slightly. His men moved instantly, retreating, dispersing into the night like ghosts. Before he turned away, his eyes lifted. They met mine. For one heartbeat, the world froze. There was no apology in his gaze. No guilt. Only acknowledgement, as if he were saying, "You see me. And I see you." Then he turned his back and walked away. The police wouldn't find my father's body intact. They wouldn't list his name in any official report. To them, he was just another casualty of organized crime, another foreigner who got too close to the fire. To me, he was everything. I collapsed to my knees in the rain, fists pressed to the ground, sobbing as ash fell around me like dark snow. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't scream anymore. Something worse happened. I went quiet. That night, I didn't just lose my father. I lost innocence, safety, mercy. And standing in the ruins of smoke and betrayal, with Kang Min-jae's face burned into my memory, I made a vow that would shape the rest of my life. I wouldn't mourn forever. I wouldn't forgive. I would survive. And one day, no matter how long it took, I would make Kang Min-jae pay for every second my father suffered. Even if I had to marry the devil himself to do it. Revenge doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives quietly, patiently, wrapped in discipline, buried under years of restraint. It grows in the spaces where grief festers and time pretends to heal. That was the lesson I learned after my father's death. I didn't scream when they lowered his coffin into the ground. There was no body to bury, only fragments, ashes, and a sealed casket filled with lies. The priest spoke words meant to comfort the living, but they slid off me like rain off glass. People whispered around me in languages I barely heard. Some pitied me. Some feared me. Many avoided my eyes. They all sensed it. I wasn't broken. I was sharpening. The morning after the funeral, I left Korea. No farewell tour. No last look over my shoulder. I boarded a plane under a different name, carrying nothing but a single photograph of my father, and the memory of Kang Min-jae's face burned into my mind like a brand. For a long time, I didn't allow myself to cry. I believed grief was weakness, and weakness got people killed. Rebuilding myself in exile. I settled first in London, a city that swallowed outsiders whole and taught them how to survive unnoticed. I worked menial jobs at night and studied during the day. I learned how money moved, how influence flowed, how power hid behind contracts instead of guns. Economics, international law, political science. Every degree I earned felt like another brick laid in the foundation of my revenge. I learned languages not out of curiosity but necessity, Korean refined to perfection, Mandarin for trade negotiations, French for diplomacy, Russian for leverage. I trained my mind the way fighters train their bodies, relentlessly, without mercy. At night I dreamed of fire. Some mornings I woke up gasping, my hands shaking, the echo of my father's scream still ringing in my ears. On those days I'd run until my lungs burned or hit the gym until my knuckles bled. Pain was easier to control than memories. Over time, the girl who had knelt in the rain outside a burning warehouse disappeared. In her place, a woman was being forged. Learning the enemy. I studied Kang Min-jae obsessively. Every article. Every interview. Every corporate filing. I tracked the rise of the Kang syndicate's transformation, from criminal empire to polished conglomerate. Hotels, shipping companies, tech startups, real estate acquisitions. Min-jae had done what my father always warned about. He learned how to hide crime behind legitimacy. The media called him a visionary. A survivor. A man who had cleaned up his family's dark past. I memorized his patterns. His allies. His weaknesses. He never married. He trusted no one fully. And he expanded aggressively into international markets, especially Africa and Europe. That's where I came in. Becoming untouchable. I didn't return as Amara Johnson, daughter of a dead fixer. I returned as Amara Grant, founder of a multinational investment firm specializing in emerging market stabilization. A woman with impeccable credentials, spotless records, and money that came from so many layers of shell companies even forensic accountants struggled to trace it. Everything I built was legal. Clean. Unassailable. I learned how to weaponize respectability. Governments welcomed me. Corporations courted me. I sat at tables my father had only negotiated from the shadows, and I smiled while doing it. But beneath the silk blouses and calm diplomacy, every move was calculated. Every acquisition was a chess piece. And slowly, invisibly, I began to close the net around Kang Min-jae. The first contact. Our first meeting wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It happened in Singapore at a closed-door financial summit attended by global elites and men who pretended they weren't criminals. I felt him before I saw him, the subtle shift in the room's energy when someone dangerous enters. Kang Min-jae stood near the balcony, speaking to a minister, his posture relaxed, his presence commanding without effort. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, more controlled, more dangerous. I approached without hesitation. When he turned and our eyes met, I saw it instantly. Recognition. Not of who I was, but of what I represented. Power. He studied my face longer than politeness allowed. Something in his gaze sharpened, like a predator sensing familiarity it couldn't place. "Miss Grant," he said, extending his hand. "You've been difficult to track." I shook his hand. His grip was firm. Warm. I hated that my body remembered him before my mind could stop it. "Privacy is valuable," I replied. "Especially in your line of work." His lips curved faintly. "So you know my reputation." "I know many things," I said. The air between us tightened. Planting the hook. Over the next months, our paths crossed repeatedly, boardrooms, galas, private negotiations. I positioned myself as indispensable, an investor who could open doors Min-jae needed and close ones he feared. I watched him carefully. He was disciplined, strategic, brutal when necessary but never reckless. The monster I'd built in my mind was real, but he was also something else. Lonely. Min-jae didn't drink excessively. He didn't indulge in meaningless pleasure. He worked, trained, slept, and watched. A man always bracing for the next attack. I used that. I offered stability, partnership, trust. And little by little he let me closer. Not into his heart, but into his empire. The trap begins to close. Behind the scenes I moved quietly. I bought stakes in companies that supplied his shipping routes. I funded politicians who owed him favors, then turned those favors into liabilities. I gathered information, documented transactions, archived secrets. Not to destroy him outright. Not yet. I wanted him to fall slowly. To feel safe first. One evening, after a long negotiation, Min-jae walked me to my car. "You play a dangerous game, Miss Grant," he said casually. I met his gaze, unflinching. "So do you, Mr. Kang?" For a moment, something like admiration flickered in his eyes. And in that instant I realized something chilling. Kang Min-jae didn't just respect me. He was drawn to me. I watched him walk away, my pulse steady, my resolve unbroken. 7 years of patience had led me here. The game was no longer about revenge alone. It was about control. And I was finally ready to take it. Power has a sound. It's quiet but unmistakable. A shift in the room. A pause in conversations. A subtle recalibration of respect. By the time Kang Min-jae officially noticed me, that sound followed wherever I went. He didn't rush. That was the first thing I learned about him up close. Min-jae never lunged for control. He circled it. Tested it. Studied how people moved when they thought no one important was watching. And once he decided you were useful, or dangerous, he adjusted accordingly. Our interactions became frequent enough to feel intentional. Private dinners after negotiations. Invitations to informal meetings that were anything but. Conversations that drifted far from business, then snapped back with surgical precision. Every word between us carried weight. Every silence spoke louder than threats. He asked questions that sounded harmless. Where did I grow up? Why did I choose international finance? Why did I never speak about family? I answered each one with half-truths polished to perfection. I had learned something crucial over the years. Lies rot when they're too big. Truths, carefully edited, last forever. I prefer chosen families, I told him once, swirling wine in a crystal glass. Blood complicates things. His eyes lingered on me longer than usual. That's true, he said. Blood always demands payment. I wondered if he remembered the night he spilled mine. The investigation. The first crack in Min-jae's empire came quietly, exactly how I planned it. An anonymous tip reached the Korean Anti-Corruption Bureau. Then another. Then a third. Old financial trails resurfaced. Former associates were suddenly cooperative. Journalists started asking questions they'd been paid not to ask for years. Min-jae didn't panic. He prepared. Meetings multiplied. Security tightened. His men moved like shadows wherever he went. I watched it all from the inside, calm and patient, offering solutions that seemed generous, but came with strings. One evening, he invited me to his private residence overlooking the Han River. It wasn't ostentatious. No gold-plated excess. Just clean lines, controlled luxury, and the unmistakable atmosphere of a man who trusted very few people. "You're aware I'm under scrutiny," he said once we were alone. "Yes," I replied. "So am I." That earned a small smile. "You don't seem afraid." "I don't frighten easily." That was true, just not for the reasons he assumed. The offer beneath the offer. Min-jae poured us drinks himself. A deliberate move. Control disguised as courtesy. "There's a way out of this," he said, leaning against the counter. "For both of us." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." He studied me, eyes sharp, calculating. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. "A marriage?" he said calmly. The word landed between us like a blade. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside my chest. "A contractual union," he clarified. "You bring international legitimacy. Political insulation. I bring protection, influence, and access. Together we become untouchable." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because the universe had a cruel sense of humor. The man who murdered my father wanted to make me his wife. "And why me?" I asked. "Because," he said without hesitation, "you're the only person in the room who doesn't look at me like a monster or a god." I held his gaze. Perhaps I just hide it better. That earned another smile, this one darker. Testing the devil. I didn't accept immediately. I asked questions. Detailed ones. Legal frameworks. Exit clauses. Power structures. Media narratives. I treated the proposal like a hostile takeover. Min-jae answered every question without flinching. "You'd be safe," he said. "No one would dare touch you." I tilted my head. "And you'd never betray me?" The room went still. Min-jae straightened slowly, his expression unreadable. "I never betray my own." The words echoed in my head. He said them the same way my father once did. That almost broke me. The choice. I left his residence that night without giving an answer. In my car, parked beneath the glow of city lights, I sat gripping the steering wheel as memories crashed over me. My father's voice. The fire. The scream. This was the moment revenge dreams were built for. Marrying the enemy wasn't just poetic, it was perfect. Inside his home. Inside his bed. Inside his empire. But something unexpected gnawed at me. Min-jae wasn't a reckless villain. He was disciplined, intelligent, controlled, and dangerous in ways far deeper than violence. If I accepted, there would be no turning back. If I refused, the opportunity might never come again. By the time I reached my apartment, my decision was already made. Acceptance. I called him the next morning. "I'll do it," I said. "On my terms." Silence stretched across the line. Then quiet satisfaction. "Of course," Min-jae replied. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a lover. I saw a woman stepping willingly into the lion's den, with a knife hidden behind her smile. Kang Min-jae thought this marriage would save him. He had no idea it was the beginning of his reckoning. They called it the wedding of the decade. International headlines splashed our faces across glossy screens. A global power union, a symbol of reform, a love story no one saw coming. Commentators spoke about diplomacy and redemption, about how Kang Min-jae had finally turned his back on bloodstained legacies. They praised my grace, my mystery, my influence. No one asked what it cost to smile that wide. The morning of the wedding dawned pale and cold, the sky stretched tight with clouds like it was holding its breath. I stood alone in the penthouse suite reserved for me, the city of Seoul glittering below like a crown of knives. Stylists moved around me in reverent silence, brushing silk over my skin, pinning pearls into my hair. They dressed me in white. The irony tasted bitter. As they fastened the gown, I caught my reflection, tall, composed, dark skin luminous against ivory fabric. To the world, I looked like a bride stepping into a fairy tale. Only I knew I was stepping onto a battlefield. My phone buzzed once. A single message from an unknown number. "He would be proud of you." I closed my eyes. For the first time in 7 years, my hands shook. The ceremony. The venue overlooked the Han River, all glass and steel and immaculate symmetry, nothing organic, nothing accidental. Security was everywhere, discreet but absolute. Politicians, CEOs, foreign dignitaries, crime lords in tailored suits pretending to be philanthropists. They all gathered under crystal chandeliers, exchanging smiles that concealed rivalry centuries old. This wasn't a wedding. It was a summit. When the music began, the room rose as one. I walked down the aisle slowly, deliberately, every step echoing like a drumbeat. I didn't look at the guests. I didn't look at the cameras. I looked at him. Kang Min-jae stood at the altar in a black suit cut to perfection, posture relaxed, eyes steady. He looked every inch the untouchable king the world believed him to be. When his gaze met mine, something unreadable flickered across his face. Not doubt. Not fear. Something closer to respect. That unsettled me more than hatred ever could. The officiant spoke words about unity and trust, about futures intertwined. I barely heard them. My pulse roared in my ears, each beat carrying the weight of everything this moment represented. When Min-jae took my hand, his grip was warm and firm. "Are you certain?" he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. I smiled for the cameras. "Absolutely." Vows spoken, truth buried. We exchanged vows written by lawyers and polished by publicists. Promises carefully constructed to mean everything and nothing at once. When Min-jae slid the ring onto my finger, it felt heavier than gold. The applause was thunderous. Confetti fell like false snow. And just like that, I became Mrs. Kang. The reception. The reception was a spectacle, champagne flowing like water, speeches crafted to inspire envy and admiration. I played my role flawlessly, laughing at the right moments, touching Min-jae's arm with practiced ease, allowing the world to believe in our manufactured intimacy. But beneath the surface, the tension between us hummed like a live wire. Min-jae watched everything. Everyone. And he watched me most of all. "You're calm," he said as we stood on the balcony, the noise of the party muffled behind us. "Most people would be overwhelmed." "I've had a lot of practice pretending," I replied. His lips curved faintly. "So have I." For a moment, we stood in silence, the city lights reflected in the river below. Two predators sharing territory, neither willing to bare their throat. The penthouse. That night, we returned to the penthouse overlooking the city, a fortress in the sky. The doors closed behind us with a soft, final click, sealing us in. The silence was immediate. Heavy. I slipped off my heels slowly, deliberately, then turned to face him. My father died screaming in a warehouse fire, I said calmly. Min-jae froze. Not in shock, he'd anticipated this moment, but in recognition. His eyes darkened, sharpening as memory surfaced. Do you remember him? I continued. Amara Johnson. The color drained from his face. The name landed like a bullet. You're his daughter? He said quietly. Yes. The air thickened. Years of deception collapsed between us in an instant. You married me, he said slowly, to destroy me. I met his gaze without flinching. I married you to watch you fall, I corrected. To understand you. To make you feel safe before I take everything. A lesser man might have shouted. Might have threatened. Might have begged. Min-jae did none of those things. He exhaled slowly, like someone accepting an inevitable truth. So this is revenge, he said. This is justice, I replied. A marriage redefined. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one, his hand steady. I won't deny what I did, he said. Your father trusted me. That was his mistake and mine. My jaw tightened. You ordered the fire. Yes, he said. No excuses. No justifications. And I live with that every day. I wanted to hate him more than I already did. But there was something terrifying about a man who owned his sins without apology. This marriage doesn't end tonight, Min-jae continued. You want to destroy me? Fine. Do it up close. Do it honestly. I studied him, searching for deceit. All I ask, he added, is that you don't lie to me anymore. I laughed softly, bitterly. We're standing in a palace built on lies. And yet, he said, meeting my eyes, this might be the first honest thing either of us has done. The night ends. We slept in separate rooms. Not out of distance, but out of respect for the war that now existed openly between us. As I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I felt something shift inside me. The satisfaction I'd expected didn't come. Instead, there was a strange, unsettling awareness. I had stepped into Min-jae's world willingly. And now that he knew who I was, the game had changed. This wasn't predator and prey anymore. It was 2 enemies bound by vows, circling each other in the dark, each waiting to see who would strike first. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger and grief, a dangerous thought whispered. What if destroying him destroys me too? Marriage did not soften Kang Min-jae. It sharpened him. And it sharpened me too. From the outside, our union looked flawless. Elegant dinners, synchronized schedules, carefully curated affection for cameras and allies alike. We played our roles so convincingly that even seasoned criminals whispered about how perfectly matched we were. They had no idea our home was a battlefield. Every morning began like a ceasefire agreement, civil, restrained, and temporary. We shared breakfasts in a sunlit kitchen overlooking the city, exchanging polite conversation about markets and meetings while unsaid truths sat between us like loaded weapons. Neither of us trusted the peace. Living with the enemy. Min-jae never tried to intimidate me. That was his first mistake. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't threaten. Didn't remind me of what he could do. Instead, he treated me like an equal, inviting me into discussions that even his closest lieutenants weren't privy to. Strategy meetings. Security briefings. Financial restructures. He let me see the bones of his empire. At first I thought it arrogance. Then I realized it was trust. Or at least the closest thing to it a man like him could offer. You don't fear me, he said one evening as we reviewed documents late into the night. I respect your intelligence, I replied. Fear is inefficient. He smiled faintly. You're dangerous. I've been told. Test and counter moves. Min-jae tested me constantly. He introduced me to allies who expected obedience and watched to see if I'd challenge them. I did, politely, strategically, with numbers sharp enough to leave no room for argument. He brought me to meetings where betrayal was currency and silence was survival. I spoke only when necessary, and when I did, rooms shifted. Soon whispers followed me. She's not just his wife. She's his equal. She's worse. That pleased me more than it should have. But the war was mutual. I audited his companies under the guise of transparency. I flagged vulnerabilities he hadn't noticed. I asked questions that forced him to confront weaknesses he preferred to ignore. We circled each other endlessly. No strikes. No mercy. Protection without permission. The first time Min-jae crossed a line, it wasn't in anger. It was in violence. A foreign syndicate tried to use me as leverage, an accident staged during a charity visit. I never saw the threat. Never heard the warning. But Min-jae did. By morning, 3 men were missing. No bodies. No messages. Just silence. I confronted him in the penthouse, fury blazing through my restraint. "You don't get to decide who dies for me," I said coldly. His eyes hardened. "You're my wife. I am not your possession." Something dark passed through him then, old instincts colliding with new boundaries. "You live because I choose to protect you," he said. "Whether you want it or not." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly he added, "I couldn't let you die." That unsettled me more than the bloodshed ever could. Cracks in the monster. The nights were the worst. Silence stretched long between us, thick with memories and questions neither of us wanted to voice. Sometimes we shared drinks on opposite sides of the room, speaking about nothing: books, philosophy, history. Once I asked him why he never slept well. "Because I remember everything," he said. I believed him. Min-jae carried ghosts the way others carried ambition. He trained relentlessly, pushing his body past exhaustion as if pain might drown out regret. I saw the scars he never explained, the quiet rituals he followed, the way his jaw tightened whenever the past crept too close. This wasn't redemption. It was survival. And for the first time since my father's death, my hatred wavered, not weakened but complicated. That terrified me. The line we didn't cross. Attraction was inevitable. We were too close, too sharp, too aware of each other. But neither of us crossed that line. Not out of restraint, but respect for the war still being fought. One night, after a brutal day of negotiations, we stood inches apart in the kitchen, tension crackling between us like exposed wire. "This doesn't change anything," I said softly. "No," Min-jae replied. "It just makes it harder." We stepped back. The distance felt heavier than proximity ever could. A shifting battlefield. As weeks turned into months, our enemies grew bolder and smarter. Someone leaked information meant to destabilize us from within. Old loyalties fractured. Whispers of mutiny reached my ears before his. I warned him. "You're being tested," I said. "From inside." He studied me carefully. "Why tell me?" "Because if you fall," I replied, "I lose my leverage." He nodded slowly. "Fair." Together we neutralized the threat, swiftly, quietly. And in that moment something fundamental changed. We weren't just enemies sharing a roof anymore. We were allies, whether we liked it or not. The war evolves. Late one night, as rain traced lines down the glass walls of the penthouse, Min-jae spoke words I hadn't expected. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "But I won't betray you." I turned to him, studying the man who had ruined my life and saved it more than once. "Trust," I said, "is earned." "I know," he replied. "I'm prepared to pay." For the first time since our wedding, I believed him. Not because he was good, but because he was honest. And honesty in our world was rarer and more dangerous than love. The war inside our marriage wasn't ending. It was evolving. And neither of us was walking away unscarred. The ambush came on a night that was supposed to be quiet. That alone should have warned me. Min-jae and I were returning from a private meeting outside the city. No press, no entourage, just 2 armored vehicles and a reduced security detail meant to signal confidence. The road curved through a stretch of forest where the city lights faded into darkness, the kind of place where mistakes were buried and never found. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the air. A silence that pressed too hard. "Slow down," I said. Min-jae glanced at me sharply. "You sense it too." The first explosion ripped through the road ahead of us, tearing asphalt into fire and debris. The convoy screeched to a halt as gunfire erupted from the trees, precise, disciplined, professional. This wasn't a warning. It was an execution. The ambush. Bullets shattered glass. The driver swerved as Min-jae shoved me down, his body shielding mine instinctively. The world became noise and chaos, shouting, gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke. They weren't aiming for him. They were aiming for me. "Stay down," Min-jae ordered, already moving. I reached for the weapon hidden beneath my coat, my hand steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. This was the world I'd been raised in. We fought our way out inch by inch, Min-jae barking orders with lethal calm. His men responded instantly, forming a protective ring, pushing back the attackers with brutal efficiency. Then it happened. A sharp crack, too close, too precise. Min-jae stiffened. I felt the impact before I saw the blood. He staggered, a dark bloom spreading across his side, and went down hard in the rain-soaked dirt. "No," the word tore out of me before I could stop it. I was at his side in seconds, my hands slick with his blood, my heart slamming against my ribs. The gunfire began to fade as our remaining security forced the attackers to retreat, but I barely noticed. "Stay with me," I said, pressing my hands against the wound. "Don't you dare die." Min-jae laughed weakly. "Still planning to destroy me?" he murmured. "Shut up," I snapped, my voice breaking despite myself. The truth in the rain. We were alone when the noise finally faded. Rain falling hard, washing blood into the dirt. His breath was shallow, his skin cold beneath my hands. "This was never about power," he said suddenly. "What?" I demanded. "Save your strength. They came for you," he continued, eyes locking onto mine. "Because of your father." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Min-jae swallowed, pain etched deep into his features. "Your father's death, it wasn't just business." I froze. "My father ordered it," he said quietly. "Kang Song-ho." He gave the command. The name hit me harder than any bullet ever could. "You lied," I whispered. "I let you believe what was easier," he replied. "Because if I didn't obey him, he would have killed us both." My hands trembled. "I was his son," Min-jae continued, rain mixing with blood on his face. "But sons are disposable in our world. Your father trusted me because I hated what my family had become. That trust got him killed." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "You still gave the order." "Yes," he said. "And I'll carry that sin forever." I looked down at the man I had married for revenge, the man who had betrayed my father, and just took a bullet meant for me. The world tilted. Survival. The hospital was locked down within minutes. Private floors, loyal staff, silence bought at any cost. I didn't leave Min-jae's side as surgeons worked to save him, my clothes still stained with his blood. For the first time since my father's death, I prayed. Not for forgiveness. For clarity. When Min-jae finally stabilized, I collapsed into a chair outside the operating room, my body trembling with delayed shock. Kang Song-ho, the true architect of my father's death, was still alive. And he wore the same name as the man bleeding for me inside that room. The choice. Min-jae woke hours later, pale but alive. His eyes found mine instantly. "You can leave now," he said hoarsely. "You know the truth." I stood slowly. "All this time," I said, "I thought you were the monster." "I am," he replied. "Just not the only one." Silence stretched between us, heavy with possibility. "I married you to destroy you," I said. "But your father, he destroyed both of us." Min-jae closed his eyes. "If you want revenge, real revenge, it won't end with me." I stepped closer. "What are you saying?" "I'll turn against him," he said. "Publicly. Completely. The Kang Empire will burn." That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't choosing love. I wasn't choosing forgiveness. I was choosing truth. An alliance forged in blood. The weeks that followed were a blur of planning and preparation. Evidence gathered quietly over decades was brought into the light. Financial crimes. Political bribes. Assassinations disguised as accidents. Min-jae gave me access to everything. No filters. No secrets. "This ends one way," he said one night as we reviewed files. "Either we win, or we die." I met his gaze, calm and resolute. "I've already survived death," I said. "I'm not afraid." For the first time we stood on the same side, not as husband and wife, not as enemies, but as two people bound by loss and a shared enemy. The choice had been made. Blood had revealed the truth. And the final reckoning was coming. The fall of an empire never begins with an explosion. It begins with a whisper. A document quietly delivered. A phone call not returned. An ally who suddenly remembers their conscience. That was how Kang Song-ho's world started to unravel. And this time I was no longer watching from the shadows. Lighting the fuse. We moved with precision. Min-jae understood his father's empire the way a surgeon understands anatomy, where it was strong, where it bled, and where one incision could collapse everything. I understood leverage, optics, and how to turn truth into a weapon the public couldn't ignore. Together we became something dangerous. Evidence flowed like a controlled flood. Offshore accounts, recorded confessions, transaction trails linking Kang Song-ho to assassinations disguised as industrial accidents, including the warehouse fire that killed my father. We didn't release everything at once. We let it drip. Each revelation destabilized another pillar of Kang Song-ho's power. Politicians distanced themselves. Business partners froze assets. Loyalists began to defect, trading silence for immunity. The media devoured the story. The monster behind the reformed empire. Kang dynasty built on blood. And standing at the center of the storm, Unexpected and unbroken, was Kang Min-jae. Father and son. The confrontation happened in the old family estate. No cameras. No witnesses. Just blood and history and two men who had never truly been family. I stayed outside, rain soaking into my coat, every nerve screaming as the doors closed behind Min-jae. This was a reckoning he had to face alone. It took less than an hour. When he emerged, his face was carved from stone. "It's done," he said. I didn't ask how. Some truths are too heavy to carry twice. Kang Song-ho was arrested that same night, dragged from his throne in handcuffs, screaming about legacy and betrayal. In court he tried to shift blame, tried to rewrite history. But history no longer belonged to him. The evidence buried him. He died in prison months later, alone, stripped of power, remembered only as a cautionary tale. The empire burns, and changes. The Kang syndicate collapsed publicly. Assets seized. Companies dissolved. Leaders arrested. But what rose from the ashes wasn't chaos. Min-jae dismantled what remained himself, selling off remnants, shutting down operations, severing ties. He didn't try to preserve the throne. He destroyed it. "I won't inherit his sins," he said. "I end them." And for the first time I believed him completely. My father's grave. I returned to my father's grave alone. No guards. No luxury cars. Just wind, earth, and memory. "I kept my promise," I whispered, kneeling before the stone. But not the way I thought I would. There were no fireworks. No triumphant relief. Just peace. A quiet, fragile peace that settled into my bones for the first time since the fire. When I stood, Min-jae was waiting at a distance, respectful, silent. "You don't owe me anything," he said when I approached. "If you want to leave, now is the time." I searched his face. This man had betrayed my father. This man had bled for me. This man had burned his own world to tell the truth. "I didn't marry you for love," I said. "I know. I stayed for the truth." "And now?" he asked. I took his hand, not as a tactic, not as a performance. "As a choice," I said. "A different ending." We left Korea months later. Not in exile, by decision. We built something quieter. Smaller. Clean. No empire. No throne. Just two survivors who refused to let the past dictate the rest of their lives. Some nights the ghosts still came. Some mornings the scars still ached. But the fire no longer owned me. I had entered that marriage seeking revenge. I walked out of it with justice. And in doing so, I learned something my father never had the chance to teach me. Power taken by blood always demands more blood. But power surrendered, truthfully, deliberately, can finally set you free.